10. Robert Downey Jr. wasn't Marvel's first choice. It's almost impossible now to imagine anyone but Robert Downey Jr. as Tony Stark, the charismatic genius with a moral compass that flickers between brilliance and arrogance. But in 2006, Marvel executives weren't convinced. Downey was fresh out of years of legal trouble, a history of addiction, and a reputation that made studios nervous. He wasn't exactly the safe bet for launching a multi-million-dollar superhero franchise. Initially, the studio explored other names. Tom Cruise was seriously considered but reportedly wanted too much creative control and even pushed to make the Iron Man suit more open-faced to show off his expressions. Nicolas Cage, Hugh Jackman, and Clive Owen were also floated at different stages. None quite fit the balance between charm, intellect, and vulnerability the role required. Then came Jon Favreau. The director, known for Elf and Zathura, saw something no one else did. He believed Downey's turbulent past could fuel his performance. Tony Stark is a man who's had everything, lost it all, and has to rebuild himself, Favreau argued. That's Robert's story, too. Downey auditioned, nailing Tony's sharp wit and wounded confidence. Favreau fought tooth and nail for him, telling Marvel, "If we don't hire him, this movie won't work." The gamble paid off spectacularly. Downey brought authenticity, humor, and a surprising amount of heart to Stark. His improvisations, like the iconic "I am Iron Man" ending, were pure instinct and would go on to define an entire generation of movie heroes. In the end, Marvel's greatest risk became its greatest asset. The studio not only built Iron Man around Downey, it built an entire cinematic universe around him. Darger 9. The script wasn't finished when filming began. Here's something wild. When Iron Man began shooting in March 2007, there wasn't a completed script. Yes, really. The film that launched the Marvel Cinematic Universe was written on the fly, scene by scene, day by day. The early drafts were thin, filled with technical jargon about weapons, robotics, and military life, but they lacked the spark, the humor and humanity that would define the film. Jon Favreau wanted to keep things spontaneous, allowing actors to find the rhythm naturally. It was an approach more common in comedy, not blockbuster action. But Favreau believed that improvisation would make the film feel real. So, much of Iron Man's dialogue was crafted on set. Robert Downey Jr. thrived in this chaos. He'd come in early, scribble notes, rewrite lines, and test jokes until something clicked. Jeff Bridges, who played Obadiah Stane, later said in an interview that the lack of a full script freaked him out. "We were making a $140 million movie, and every day felt like jazz, improv. You had to trust the rhythm. This unorthodox method gave the movie its signature tone. The banter between Tony and Pepper Potts, Gwyneth Paltrow, feels fresh because they often improvised those moments, laughing through takes until they landed something natural. Even the cave scenes where Tony builds the first Iron Man suit were developed on set, with the actors and technical team brainstorming together how a genius engineer might realistically construct a life-saving exosuit from scrap parts. Instead of sinking the production, this creative freedom gave Iron Man a soul. It didn't feel like a cold, calculated superhero movie. It felt alive. The wit, the humor, the imperfections, they all came from that chaos. And that chaotic brilliance became the blueprint for Marvel's storytelling style for the next decade. Darger 8. The iconic Iron Man suit was almost entirely practical. Before CGI took over superhero movies, Iron Man, 2008, did something remarkable. It built the suit for real. Yes, the armor that Robert Downey Jr. wears on screen actually existed, and it weighed nearly 90 pounds. Director Jon Favreau wanted the first Iron Man film to feel grounded, like it could happen in the real world. So he hired Stan Winston Studios, and the same team behind the Terminator and Jurassic Park effects, to create functional, wearable armor pieces. The result? Over 4 versions of the Iron Man suit, ranging from the rough, Mark I, built in a cave to the sleek Mark III used in the final battle, were physically crafted from metal, resin, and fiberglass. Each was hand-painted, detailed with hydraulic-looking parts, and designed to actually open, close, and light up. Some suits even had moving faceplates controlled with hidden levers. Robert Downey Jr. later joked that the armor felt like wearing a car. The heat on set made it nearly unbearable. At one point, during the desert sequences, the internal cooling systems failed, and crew members had to blow cold air inside the suit between takes. Yet Downey insisted on wearing it whenever possible, believing that the physical weight helped him feel like Tony Stark trapped inside his own creation. Not every scene could use the real suit, though. For complex stunts and flying sequences, the team turned to CGI. But Favreau's rule was clear. The audience should never be able to tell where the real armor ends and the digital one begins. That's why the visual effects team meticulously scanned each physical suit to ensure perfect continuity. The blend of practical effects and digital artistry gave Iron Man its signature look: gritty, metallic, and believable. It also set a new gold standard for superhero realism. Before Iron Man, superhero costumes often looked like spandex fantasies. After Iron Man, every studio started chasing that balance between tactile realism and futuristic design. It's fitting, really, because Tony Stark's story is about merging man and machine. The fact that Robert Downey Jr. literally did that on set only deepened the illusion. Darker 7. Tony Stark's character was inspired by a real billionaire. Here is a truth hidden in plain sight. Tony Stark is not just a comic book creation. He's modeled after a very real man, Howard Hughes. Stan Lee, who co-created Iron Man in 1963, once said, "Tony Stark is basically Howard Hughes if he'd put on armor." Hughes, for those who don't know, was America's original eccentric billionaire, a pioneering aviator, engineer, movie producer, and notorious playboy. He designed aircraft, broke flight records, and built weapons during World War II. But, like Stark, he was also deeply flawed. His brilliance was matched only by his obsession with control and his descent into paranoia later in life. When the film team began shaping the 2008 version of Tony Stark, they leaned into that modern parallel. They asked, who would Tony Stark be if he lived today? The answer, a tech genius with celebrity swagger, someone like Elon Musk. And in a fascinating twist, the filmmakers actually met Musk during production. Downey toured SpaceX and Tesla headquarters to study Musk's mannerisms, and Musk himself appears briefly in Iron Man 2. But the Hughes influence remained in Tony's DNA, the mix of genius, recklessness, and isolation. Just like Hughes, Stark builds machines that redefine industries but struggles to connect with people. His workshop scenes, filled with flying sparks and mechanical prototypes, mirror Hughes' own obsession with tinkering in private hangars. Robert Downey Jr. took it one step further. He studied old footage of Hughes to capture that razor-sharp energy, a man who's always thinking 2 steps ahead, but can turn his brain off long enough to rest. That nervous confidence, that restless mind, became the heartbeat of Tony Stark. And here's the twist. Audiences fell in love not because Tony Stark was a perfect hero, but because he wasn't. He was flawed, funny, and haunted. A man too smart for his own good, trying to prove he wasn't just another billionaire with a god complex. In a sense, Iron Man redefined the modern hero not as someone born noble, but as someone who builds their own redemption piece by piece. That human side, the vulnerability behind the technology, made Tony Stark relatable, even when he was flying at 30,000 feet. It's what turned a comic book character into a cultural icon. By the time Iron Man wrapped filming, no one yet realized that these creative risks, the realism of the armor and the depth of Tony A.'s character, would spark a revolution in superhero storytelling. But the surprises didn't stop there. Because the next 2 facts reveal how Iron Man secretly rewired Hollywood's entire approach to world-building and what nearly destroyed it before it even hit theaters. Darker 6. Marvel risked everything because it was nearly bankrupt. It's hard to imagine now, but back in the early 2000s, Marvel wasn't the cinematic powerhouse it is today. It was broke, desperate even. After decades of poor business decisions and a string of failed movie deals, the company was buried under debt. Marvel didn't even own the film rights to its biggest characters. Spider-Man belonged to Sony, the X-Men and Fantastic Four were at Fox, and the Hulk was controlled by Universal. That left Marvel with second-tier heroes, characters most of the general public barely recognized. So when executives decided to make Iron Man the first in-house production under their new studio, it wasn't a bold flex, it was a gamble for survival. The company literally mortgaged the film rights of 10 of its remaining heroes, including Captain America, Thor, and Ant-Man, to secure a $525 million loan from Merrill Lynch. If Iron Man failed, Marvel would have lost control of all of them. In other words, no Avengers, no MCU, no Empire. Even Hollywood didn't believe it would work. Every major studio turned down distribution rights before Paramount finally took the risk. At the time, superhero fatigue was starting to set in. People thought Iron Man was too obscure to carry a blockbuster. But Kevin Feige, Marvel's new president of production, had a vision. "We'll make one movie at a time," he said, "and if we do it right, they'll connect." The success of Iron Man in 2008 wasn't just financial, it was existential. It made nearly $600 million worldwide, paying off Marvel excess debt and proving they didn't need to rely on Spider-Man or Wolverine. It validated their biggest gamble, that audiences would care about a character they'd barely heard of if the story was great. And the irony, the entire cinematic universe that followed, the Avengers, Thanos, the Infinity Saga, all hinged on one man in a cave, hammering together a suit with nothing but scrap metal and sheer will. When you think about it, Tony Stark wasn't just building armor, he was forging the foundation of the Marvel Empire itself. Era 5. The film's ending changed cinema forever, and it was an accident. When Robert Downey Jr. looked straight into the camera and said, "I am Iron Man," history was made. It's one of the most iconic endings in movie history, an unapologetic declaration that rewrote the superhero rulebook. But here's the twist. That line wasn't in the script. It was completely improvised. Traditionally, superhero identities were secret. The hero hid behind a mask, protecting loved ones and preserving mystery. Even Spider-Man and Batman built entire narratives around that double life. But Downey and Favreau felt that Tony Stark wouldn't play by those rules. He was too egotistical, too proud. The idea of pretending to be someone else just didn't fit him. During the final press conference scene, multiple takes were shot with different lines. In one, Tony tries to deny the rumors. In another, he awkwardly dodges questions. But during one unscripted take, Downey smirked and said, "The truth is, I am Iron Man." Favreau loved it instantly. "That's Tony," he said. "He'd never hide. He'd own it." When the film premiered, that single moment drew cheers from audiences everywhere. It was raw, honest, and shocking. It also changed everything for the MCU. Suddenly, the secret identity trope felt outdated. Marvel's heroes could exist in public, their struggles out in the open. That choice made the stories more grounded, less about disguises, more about accountability. Even Kevin Feige later admitted that line set the tone for the entire franchise. "It was such a Tony Stark thing to do," he said, "that we realized from that moment on, we just embrace who these characters are." Ironically, that same spirit of spontaneity echoed the movie's entire production process. Chaotic, fearless, and brilliantly human. No one realized it then, but that one improvised line would become the defining statement of the MCU, a declaration not just from Tony Stark, but from Marvel itself. We're done pretending. This is who we are. And perhaps that's why the ending hits so hard even today. It's not just a superhero announcing himself. It's a man taking ownership of his flaws, his genius, and his destiny. In that instant, Tony Stark stopped being a comic book character and became something else entirely, a symbol of reinvention. By the time Iron Man hit theaters, Marvel had gone from bankruptcy to brilliance, from obscurity to global dominance, all in the time it takes for one man to step out of a cave and say the truth. But behind that triumph were even more hidden stories, covert cameos, cutting-edge tech, and one after-credits scene that no one saw coming. 4. The post-credits scene was filmed in secret and started the Marvel Universe. When audiences first saw Iron Man in 2008, most of them didn't even know what post-credit scenes were supposed to mean. At that point, Marvel had never done one, and the concept of teasing a cinematic universe was unheard of. Yet those few who stayed seated after the credits rolled witnessed something that would change movie storytelling forever: the appearance of Nick Fury. In the now legendary scene, Tony Stark comes home after his press conference, only to find a man waiting in the dark. "I'm here to talk to you about the Avenger Initiative," Fury says, and in that moment the MCU was born. But here's the secret. That entire scene was shot in total secrecy. Even the crew working on Iron Man didn't know about it. Samuel L. Jackson was quietly flown in and filmed his cameo in a locked-down set over a single night. The dialogue wasn't included in the official script to avoid leaks, and only a handful of executives knew it existed. Kevin Feige and Jon Favreau wanted it to be a surprise Easter egg, a reward for true fans. And boy, did it work. Fans who grew up reading the Avengers comics lost their minds. It was the first time a superhero film dared to connect universes, a concept that, up to that point, only existed in comic books. Suddenly, audiences realized Iron Man wasn't a one-off story. It was the beginning of something much bigger. Here's another twist. The original version of the scene actually contained more comic book references. Fury was supposed to mention mutants and radioactive spider bites, a nod to the X-Men and Spider-Man. But those lines were cut due to complicated legal rights issues. Still, the mere mention of the Avenger Initiative was enough to ignite a global obsession. In the years that followed, the post-credits scene became Marvel's signature move, an invitation to the next chapter. Every studio tried to copy it, but none matched the shock of that first reveal. Think about it. 10 seconds of dialogue filmed in secret created one of the most successful movie franchises in history. It wasn't just a tease, it was the moment the MCU took its first breath. Chapter 3. The tech in the movie was way ahead of its time. When Iron Man premiered in 2008, audiences thought the technology was pure science fiction. But in reality, the film's depiction of futuristic engineering, AI, and holographic design turned out to be eerily prophetic. Tony Stark's workshop, with its transparent holograms, robotic assistants, and 3D modeling, was inspired by real concepts being developed at the time by the U.S. military and private aerospace firms. Jon Favreau wanted Stark's genius to feel believable, so he collaborated with real engineers from companies like Lockheed Martin and SpaceX. The goal was simple: make the science look one prototype away from reality. The film's visual designers created the now famous JRVIS interface, a blend of floating blue schematics and hand gestures that allowed Tony to manipulate digital models mid-air. Audiences were stunned. Within a few years, similar motion tracking technology appeared in real-life prototypes, like Microsoft's Kinect and AR systems used by the military. Even the concept of Tony's exosuit was grounded in research. The Mark I armor, built in a cave from scraps, drew inspiration from early combat exoskeletons designed for soldiers. The Mark III's flight systems, meanwhile, mimicked jet propulsion and gyroscopic stabilization, technologies NASA engineers had been experimenting with. Robert Downey Jr. worked closely with the effects team to make every movement feel natural. He studied how pilots move inside cockpits, how engineers test equipment, and how mechanics handle heavy machinery. When he manipulates holograms or calibrates his suit, it feels instinctive, not fantasy. That authenticity became a cornerstone of the MCU's visual identity, high-tech but rooted in reality. The film even inspired a new wave of innovation. Elon Musk, who, as mentioned earlier, directly inspired aspects of Tony Stark's character, revealed that Iron Man motivated him to push SpaceX and Tesla forward. Engineers at MIT cited the movie's visual interfaces as a creative benchmark for interactive design. In hindsight, Iron Man wasn't just predicting the future, it was shaping it. The movie turned cutting-edge science into something aspirational, transforming the image of a billionaire tech genius into a cultural archetype. Suddenly, STEM looked cool. Robotics, coding, and engineering became heroic pursuits for an entire generation. The beauty of Iron Man ERA's technology wasn't that it was perfect. It was that it felt possible. And for millions of fans, that made the dream of building something extraordinary seem just a little closer to reality. By now, it is clear that Iron Man wasn't simply a superhero movie. It was a revolution in storytelling, technology, and cinematic world-building. But the final two facts reveal just how deep its cultural impact went, from redefining modern heroism to rewriting Hollywood's entire playbook for success. Record 2, Iron Man, was the blueprint for every Marvel movie that followed. When Iron Man premiered in 2008, it was just the beginning of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It was the DNA template for every superhero film that came after it. The tone, the pacing, the humor, the moral complexity. It all started here. Before Iron Man, most superhero movies followed the same rigid formula. A tragic origin, a reluctant hero, a clear villain, and a world-saving finale. Iron Man flipped that on its head. Tony Stark was an E.T., a tortured soul seeking redemption. He was a narcissistic genius who created his own problems and had to grow out of them. He wasn't chosen by destiny. He chose himself. That single shift changed the emotional logic of superhero storytelling. Marvel built its empire on that foundation. The character-driven humor, the real-world setting, and the improvisational dialogue became trademarks. The film's mixture of action and wit, without losing emotional depth, became the model Kevin Feige used to greenlight everything that followed. Thor, Captain America, the first Avenger, and even Guardians of the Galaxy all borrowed from Iron Man's DNA. The movie also proved that audiences didn't just want spectacle. They wanted characters they could connect with. Tony Stark wasn't perfect, but he was relatable. His flaws, ego, guilt, pride, were deeply human. When he built his first suit in that cave, it wasn't just a weapon. It was a metaphor for self-reinvention. That emotional through line became the heartbeat of the MCU. The success of Iron Man also revolutionized how studios thought about franchises. Instead of making isolated movies, Marvel used it as a pilot episode for an interconnected world, a cinematic Phase 1. It was a narrative risk no one had attempted at that scale, and its success made Marvel the most dominant entertainment brand on Earth. Even beyond the MCU, other studios began copying the formula. From the Dark Universe to the DCEU, everyone wanted what Iron Man had. But what they missed was the secret ingredient: authenticity. Iron Man didn't start as a marketing strategy. It started as a risky, deeply personal story about a man forced to confront the monster he created. That honesty resonated far more than the explosions ever could. To this day, every Marvel opening logo, with that triumphant music and comic book montage, owes its existence to that first roll of the dice in 2008. Iron Man wasn't just a movie. It was the start of a cultural phenomenon. Number 1. The film redefined Robert Downey Jr.'s life, and Hollywood's definition of a comeback. Few movie roles have ever mirrored their actors' real lives the way Tony Stark mirrored Robert Downey Jr. Before Iron Man, Downey was considered a Hollywood burnout. a once brilliant actor whose talent had been eclipsed by addiction and scandal. He'd spent years in and out of rehab, even serving jail time. Studios didn't trust him. Insurers refused to cover him. Then came Iron Man. Downey approached the role like a man fighting for his life, because in many ways he was. He poured everything into Tony Stark: the arrogance, the humor, the self-doubt, and the painful awareness of wasted potential. "I know what it's like to rebuild from nothing," he once said. Tony and I were both trying to put ourselves back together. The transformation was electric. Critics praised his performance as one of the most charismatic in modern cinema. Audiences didn't just like Tony Stark, they believed in him. Downey became the face of Marvel and, in time, the face of redemption in Hollywood. The studio's faith in him paid off 1,000-fold. Over the next decade, he became the emotional anchor of the MCU, starring in 9 films and helping the franchise earn over $14 billion globally. But beyond numbers, Downey's comeback sent a powerful message: that talent and authenticity could triumph over even the darkest chapters. When Tony Stark snapped his fingers in Avengers Endgame and whispered, "I am Iron Man," it wasn't just the end of a character. It was the full circle of a man who rebuilt both himself and the industry that once turned its back on him. The moment audiences cried wasn't just for Tony, it was for the man behind the mask. Iron Man redefined heroism not as perfection, but as perseverance. It made vulnerability powerful. It turned cynicism into courage. And it proved that sometimes the greatest special effect isn't CGI, it's a second chance. When the credits rolled in 2008, no one knew they had just witnessed the beginning of a cinematic revolution. Iron Man didn't just launch a franchise, it launched an era. From the hum of an arc reactor to the swagger of a billionaire inventor, it reimagined what it meant to be a hero. Every spark, every line, every risk behind the camera shaped the world we live in today, where the MCU dominates pop culture and Tony Stark remains immortal. Not because of his armor, but because of his heart. So next time you hear that metallic sound of the suit powering up, remember this: Iron Man wasn't just built, it was forged. In fire, in failure, and in faith. If you liked this video, don't forget to hit like and share it with your friends who love movie trivia as much as you do. Subscribe to our channel so you won't miss any of our upcoming Top 10 deep dives into iconic films that changed history. Click the Join button to become a member and unlock behind-the-scenes content, exclusive polls, and bonus episodes. And if you'd like to support the channel directly, hit that Super Thanks button below. Your support keeps us flying higher than Iron Man himself. See you in the next video.